Line's good.
Never on!
Whoa.
Hard! Release!
Come on, Brent. Line's good. Got real close.
The hair high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham, Scott. Alongside, as always, hello, Scott.
Sean, welcome home. Welcome home. You've been away. I hear you're pretty tired.
Yeah, little tired here. As we record this, I've slept 15 of the last 20 hours, and I'm doing everything I can to prop myself up in this chair that I'm sitting in. Normally I stand when I do this, but not so much today. Feels like a sitting kind of day.
Yeah. But Sean, you said to me, you know what? I've slept so much. I've got a lot of energy. A lot of energy to bring to the show. So we're going to give you a lot of energy today, talking about the World Men's Curling Championship that just wrapped up, and maybe briefly about the Grand Slam that's starting. Apparently started yesterday, but
there's no video evidence.
Not on TV, so we don't know anything. But yeah, we can bring it and talk about it.
Well, you know who else brought it, Scott, is your new world champion, Bruce Mouat from Scotland. They get their first Worlds. It's weird. It feels like they've been around a while, but they really haven't. Just 5 years or so at the front line. So it hasn't been that long of a drought, if you even want to call it a drought, but they did achieve their goal of a world championship, beating Canada in the final. You were in the building, Scott, and
Yes.
I went through, you were texting back and forth with the guys from Rocks Across the Pond, and I saw them all later, but at one point you put something like, there's a lot of energy in the building, and you attached a video of people being utterly silent.
It wasn't meant to come off that way. I swear that people were chanting Scotland, there was quite a bit of energy in the building. The Scottish fans were great with their cheers, and then the Canadian fans were sort of responding to them, saying responding to Scotland with chants of Canada. And the opening ceremony, was a lot of energy. It felt really cool to be in the building. And then after the fourth end, it was done. It's very simplistic for me to say that the whole game hinged on that one shot, because it did seem in the early ends like Brad was a little bit tentative with his line calls. They were getting hits and rolls just to not quite the right place, like they had been the whole weekend leading up to it. And then to miss a draw for two heavy in a spot that he had just thrown the exact same shot, that I believe the sweepers would have told him, okay, maybe it's keened up like a little bit since the last shot, because they swept it the whole way. But maybe it was because they swept it the whole way, and then he thought he had to give it a bit more, and it just went through. And after that, the way that the Scottish team was playing that day, you weren't going to beat them. If you don't miss that shot, it might have been tough to beat them. If you miss it, close the, what do they say? Turn off the lights, the party's over.
Turn off the lights, the party's over. And yeah, it did seem like I saw the video of the last shot. I did see that, where, again, I don't know how that ended. I really didn't see much of this, but just from the feel of it, that it was kind of a sense of resignation from the crowd. That's it. Bruce Mouat, those guys are too good, and you're not going to beat them. And then certainly on that last shot, just wide open hit, 4-3. The only question was, would Brad shake? And of course he did, for a 9-3 final. And congratulations to Scotland. Scott, you were in the building a lot during the week, more so than perhaps other world championships, given that it was here. Let's say that. Did you get the sense while you were there that Scotland was on track? Because during the week, it seemed like the story was Switzerland going on that great run. They finished 11-1. And obviously the home side, when the event is in Canada, is going to get a lot of attention. So the Gushue team took up a lot of oxygen, particularly, I would say, losing to Norway, perhaps causing some consternation amongst the Canadian fans. But overall, 10-2 for Scotland going into the playoffs. But from where I was, again, not in the building and not really watching live, there wasn't that much chatter about them. Every time I looked at Twitter, it was about other teams. It was about, oh, Italy's doing a little worse than we might have thought. Switzerland's doing great. Oh, this Norwegian team has got some legs to it. Or then when New Zealand won its game, it was like, hey, congratulations, New Zealand. It just seemed like there wasn't a lot of focus put on the Scottish team during the course of the week.
Yeah, there really wasn't. They were sort of just quietly doing their business, taking care of business. They lost their 2 games like relatively early, I think, to Switzerland and Sweden were the 2 games that they lost. So they weren't, surprising results that you would say, oh, geez, I can't believe they lost to those teams, right? Both pretty strong teams. And they end up finishing the week in that second spot. And really the story of the end of the week was Niklas Edin, sort of the collapse on Friday, which continued into Saturday. So you're right. I think the Scottish team really did fly under the radar. In the building, you could definitely feel their presence because the Scottish fans were so vocal and so present in amongst the crowd. It was the Scottish fans were probably the second biggest contingent that I saw there. There were some Swedish junior curlers that were there that were quite vocal. Also, a pretty strong Swiss contingent chanting "Hop Swiss" over and over. It was really great, but the Scottish fans were sort of there the whole time, and I think maybe every time I went, Scotland was playing. So even when Canada wasn't playing and I went, Scotland was there. So maybe that's sort of clouding my judgment a bit, but that's the feeling I took away, was that their fans were a little more present. So as far as them flying under the radar, like you said, yeah, they did. When you looked up at the end of the week, the way that Edin was playing at the beginning, you would have expected him to get one of those spots. And the way that Switzerland was playing, I sort of expected them to be the team that dropped down at the end of the week versus a Niklas Edin. So,
right.
They got that bye. It took full advantage. And I looked at the stats for the final, Sean. I said stats, weird there, but Mouat 97, Hardy 98, Lammy 94, McMillan 97. The only shot I think Bruce Mouat missed was in 6. He played a takeout and rolled too far, which gave Gushue the chance to draw for 2. That's the only shot he missed the whole game. It was clinical, precise, amazing shot making, and something that I really think should be celebrated is that they went out and won it. Like, it wasn't Team Gushue losing because of that missed draw.
Right.
That certainly changed how the game played out, but given how Scotland played, I don't think the outcome would have been different.
Yeah, I mean, the spread of 9-3, yeah, you had another point for Canada, and towards that latter part of the game, 6-4, maybe that does change the way Brad plays the second half of the game, potentially strategy-wise. But you're right. You look at the line score, and it's a line score that shows that one team won the game pretty handily. And again, the stats are such that Canada didn't play poorly. It didn't seem like. Just really matters when you miss, when you're going to miss. And you're right. The 2 losses for Scotland relatively early. The second one was to Switzerland, as you said. That came Tuesday night. So by my math, that put them at 4-2, which, I mean, that's not terrible, but it's not going to capture too many headlines at that point of the week.
They're not wire to wire,
right
at the top of the standings. But they were definitely the best team on Sunday, and probably the best team all weekend other than Canada.
Right.
So it made a lot of sense that they came out on top. And Sean, I think it was like also really good story for representation with Bruce Mouat being gay and open about it. And he was being profiled on, I think, was it Outsports or something? So just like even having that story is really feel good part of this event. And I think it was like, it was just a really fun atmosphere, even though Canada didn't win.
Yeah, so I was at the one draw on the opening Saturday night. Yeah, it was a pretty good vibe. There's good energy in the building. That was a game where I think the Norwegians won, and there was a good Norwegian crowd there going, like, lots of energy. Oh, no, excuse me. It was the Czechs. The Czechs won that night, and there was a small but very vocal Czech contingent that I was glad I wasn't sitting next to, given how loud they were. But you love to see it, and Lucas Klima and the guys were embracing it and everything that came with it. There was also a pretty good Turkish cheering section that night. They played China in Japan in a game that nobody seemed to want to win. And that was sort of tough with two rookies in their first games at a world championship, missing shots back and forth to go to an extra end. But it did seem like, the crowd was great. There was some cheering of misses early. I don't know if that continued through the week. Didn't really like that. But overall, the energy that night was good. And throughout the week, it seemed to sustain, and good job, Scotland. Scott, I don't know what this actually means long term, given that we're still 3 years clear of the Olympic Games, but Mouat has his first now, and he has the potential to be a multi-time world champion. I think we'd all be surprised if these guys, assuming they want to keep playing, aren't multi-time world champions. So it's really hard to project moving forward. But when you look at Scottish curling, you do have Ross White there. They're going to have to beat them in that Scottish National Championship, although Scotland does have the ability to send whoever they want to a world championship. But just looking forward, you got to think these guys have a chance to be within that pantheon of greatest of all time. I know that's a lot to say early on here, but Niklas Edin's getting older. Who knows what Canada's going to do with its structure? They do have to contend with the Swiss team. Looks really good. The Italians are up and coming, but ultimately you look around and they're in pretty good shape, perhaps, to go on a run.
Yeah, I think they're sort of in the Yves Muirhead circa 2014 seat, with a lot of experience already under their belts. A world championship, as you said, they should be favorites going into the Olympics. I believe they were favorites going into the last one, just given how well they were playing. Yeah, they've got a chance to really solidify their names should they choose to keep playing. And you say, like, Ross White is up and coming. Of course he is. It could be that Scottish curling finds a way for him to integrate to this team somehow, just the way that it's going. So I definitely think they'll be around for the long haul and should be, right now in 2023, maybe the favorites for 2026 at the Olympics.
Well, let's look at the other side of that gold medal game. Brad Gushue, Team Canada, they win silver. That would be their third silver medal at the World Championships. Been to 4, got to the gold medal game each time. That's Tom Brady type territory, just always getting to the championship game. I mean, Tom Brady has a better winning percentage in the finals than Brad Gushue does in World Finals, but that is quite an accomplishment. An emotional Brad Gushue on Sunday after that game. A really cool photo, too, of Mark Nichols taking a photo of his kids with, I can't remember who it was, but that kind of a cool moment, too. So, the families are all there. You got the DeHarden brothers together, Jeff Walker and his family. I don't know, this team, it's weird. None of them are old by any means, but you look back at Brad Gushue and Mark Nichols winning that gold medal in 2006, and then now they got their families there and older than they were, obviously, more mature perhaps, and have the ability to put it all into a certain level of perspective. And who knows if Gushue will win another Briar, get back to this, but nothing to sneeze at for them over the week. He was the highest percentage skip during the round robin. And Curling Canada has talked about how there is a gender divide in the reaction on Twitter and social media at World Championships. So, let's acknowledge that that's the case. But overall, it seemed like the fan response to Brad Gushue was generally pretty positive.
Well, I think that's got a lot to do with Brad Gushue, Sean, and he's been around in the curling world for almost 20 years. He's a name that everybody knows. I don't think you're going to find a lot of people sitting around a curling facility at the end of the night talking to other curlers who are going to have a lot of "I hate Brad Gushue" takes, right?
Yeah.
He's just seems a likable guy. He's media savvy, but in a way that doesn't seem maybe as calculated as other professional athletes.
Right.
He's a boy from the Rock, and how can you root against that, right? So that perception has been built over a period of 20 years. When it was Brendan Botcher at the Worlds that was trying to get Canada qualified for the Olympics and not earning a medal, I think people reacted in a similar way that they did when the women were not performing maybe as well as you would expect. So I think that the reaction to Brad Gushue has the most to do with Brad Gushue as a player himself, and most people's positive outlook on him.
Yeah, and I agree that most people, I think, do have a very positive perception of Brad Gushue. You do wonder, too, about moving forward physically. I noticed, it seemed to me the night I was there, that he was limping a little bit as he was walking around after shots. And he did talk about during the Brier that he's not or wasn't at 100% early in that event. So see what the summer brings for him. And obviously, I think he would like to do another cycle and try to get back to the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
But post 2026, who knows? He's been on TV before. Seems that that's potentially an avenue for him moving forward. We'll have to certainly see how that goes. But again, another good week for him. He's got 4 World Championship medals in 4 appearances. Nothing to sneeze at, as you said. On the bronze medal side, the Swiss beat the Italians. A bit of a blowout there on Sunday morning, 11-3. So Yannick Schwaller is on the board with a World Championship medal. Another strong posting for the Italian side as they continue to build their program leading into those 2026 Olympic Games. Scott, anything from that bronze medal game or those two teams who competed in the bronze medal game?
Yeah, I think this is we talked in our preview, Sean, of who can win, and I said Switzerland, and you were a little less convinced of that.
Yes.
I'll say they showed up this week. They played really, really, really well, save for that bronze medal game.
Yeah,
but they had a very strong week. It was nice to see Yannick Schwaller, really adapting to that role of throwing the third stones. He was the top third stone thrower all week. And you got Benoit Schwartz, who's a longtime fourth stone thrower. It seemed to work really, really well. It gave me some vibes of Tirinzoni, once she got Alina Pats, was able to sort of focus on the strategy of the game and not throwing that last rock. And it's really worked out for them. I mean, they've won 4 in a row.
Yep.
That's sort of what I took away from Switzerland. From the Italian side, probably not as strong a week as they would have liked overall. Still made it into that bronze medal game. In the qualification game, they beat Norway, who we'll talk about in a second. But like you say, they're building. I did walk by Mo Saner, and he's tall, man.
He's a big dude.
I'm pretty
really
tall.
big dude.
And I was like, oh, man, this guy's tall.
Yeah.
So a good week for Italy overall. They'll be happy, I think, with the results, but the process is what's more important for them.
Yeah, you look at some of those numbers for them. They were 51% hammer efficiency, 51% on the force efficiency. You'd like to see that latter number a little bit higher. Sweden led the field in force efficiency at 69%, and the teams that finished ahead of them were in the finals were all better in that respect. Mm-hmm. They were plus 25 on the week for plus minus. That's pretty good, but they started without the hammer in 9 of the 15 games they played. So you certainly want the hammer more off. Now, a couple of those are playoffs and are out of their hands, but that's something that you're going to be looking at moving forward for them to improve. A couple tough losses for them. That loss to Norway 9-8 is going to sting a little bit, given that you win that game. Then maybe you're bringing Norway down to a third loss. You're at 3 losses. Maybe that gives you a chance to move up and be in a better spot into the playoffs. But yeah, certainly a program that is on the rise for Italy. And the Swiss, Yannick Schwaller, you're right, better than perhaps I may have given them credit for. But to be fair, when I said that 3 teams could win, it would mean that one team that I didn't think could win would have to be in the semifinals, because that's how the math works. There was 2 in the semifinals, and both of them lost. So it's again, they're really, really good. It's just, I still think there's just that bit of a gap. Maybe it closed a little bit this week on the Swiss side. As I say, the Italians are ascendant. I just want to see it a little more, and I'll be curious to see how next season goes. Both those teams should be in all the slams. They are at that point now that they should be comfortably into those fields. So it'll be fun to see. The other 2 playoff teams that we lost in the quarterfinals were Sweden and Norway. Great week for Norway, going 10-2. Wins, as I said, over the Italians. They beat the Canadians over the course of the week. Their only losses were to Scotland and to Switzerland in the round robin. A wonderful week for them. We saw it with Kristen Skazlian getting the silver medal on the women's side, and now a very strong showing on the men's side. Is Norwegian curling back, Scott?
I mean, sure. I guess you could say it's back. I'm like very. I was sort of thinking of Norway as the most, maybe what do they call it, a paper tiger in there. They got early wins against Canada and Sweden, I think. So they sort of padded their resume on that, and then none of their games were like super, super decisive, except their game against New Zealand, I guess. They played Turkey in the last round robin draw, and it was pretty close. Now, Norway had already wrapped up, I think, the 3rd spot. So, they weren't really playing for all that much. But yeah, they seemed beatable all week. Like you said, their hammer efficiency was only 47%. They really got by on mistakes from other teams. So I wasn't that surprised to see Italy come in as the number 6 seed and beat them in the qualification game. For Sweden, they had 1 loss all week until Friday.
Yeah.
Lost a game to Switzerland that I went to this game and I was bored and left. It was good teams playing.
Yeah.
But it was very not taking any chances.
Right.
Niklas Edin cracked a 2 in, I believe it was the 7th or 8th. And I was like, well, now they're up. It'll be fine. It was nice outside. And I was like, when Canada wasn't playing, there was not a lot of juice in the building.
Sure.
So even though that it was a great game in theory between 2 teams at the top of the standings, I was like thinking of what storylines can I talk about from this game? Like, who would I actually want to talk to, regardless of who won? Who would I want to talk to after the game? And there was really nothing interesting, I don't think, to be said. Like, if Sweden had lost, fine, whatever. They're playing Canada that night. That's the focus, right?
Right.
They did end up losing in a weird way to the Swiss, giving up like a steal in the last end. Anyway, so that game, it was sort of like, when I left, I was like, they're fine. They look good. They'll be okay. By the time I was watching them play Canada that night, Oscar Eriksson looked like he had lost his mojo. I don't know exactly what happened, but he was rolling out on hits. He was throwing runbacks and missing. Very un-Oscar Eriksson like stuff. So then, Canada sort of builds this big lead on, a couple really key shots, and then a big 4 were able to separate themselves a little bit more down the road, and they got a relatively easy victory. And you think, okay, well, Sweden's going to come back the next day and it'll be a different game. And it really wasn't. Like, Eriksson was still not that good in the qualification game. So that was the real difference that I saw in that team, was that Oscar Eriksson just seemed to lose it at the end of the week. I don't know if it was, they talked a lot in the game about his stones not being matched in the last round robin draw. When they went to the next sheet over, because they played on D on Friday night, and then they played on C for the qualification game. Russ was also wondering about the matching of stones on that sheet. Canada had the red stones in that game and kept the red stones throughout the weekend. They seemed to really like the stones that they had settled on, but they had to play with the stones from sheet C in the qualification game in the semifinals. So I don't know what it was. Like, Eriksson was down at 77% for the 4-5 game. Edin, as a consequence, had much tougher shots and also played really poorly. So you wonder about the stones. You wonder about
but that's your fault. I don't know if the stones aren't matched in the playoffs, even though you have to use the stones on the sheet. That's your fault. Yeah. Like, you should be at the point where you can match those stones by the end of the week. If it's Saturday night, opening draw, sure, they're not matched yet. That's fine. But it's the end of the week. You've played on that sheet. You've seen them. You've had the chance to practice during the course of the week. You have the coaches and the fifths go out every night and get to throw. Like, if they're not matched, that's on you. And
sure,
I'm not going to have any of that. And you lost 9-1. Like, you didn't play well. You're out. So, I'm surprised, certainly, that was the case, that they went out in the way that they did, losing those last 3 games. But it happens sometimes. They did win 4 straight world championships, so and an Olympic gold medal in that time. So you're not going to win them all, even though it seemed like for a while they would. And that Silvana Tirinzoni is trying to prove that wrong too. On the women's side. But certainly a wonderful run for them does come to an end here in Ottawa. Elsewhere, though, maybe the one thing that will be most remembered from this World Championship is a shot that Niklas Edin did make against the Norwegians.
Yes.
In the 10th end, a spinner to a gear for 2. That might not have been there, or certainly did not look like it was there in the hack. As you're looking from the above, the stone that he has to move is angled in a weird. I'm sure everyone has seen this by this point. That the angle of the freeze made it seem like no, not going to happen. But for as much as we make fun of the gear, this is actually the gear, and it really did come into play. Russ immediately called it the greatest shot he's ever seen. Kathy was not quite as effusive in the language she used, but was very amazed by it. I think I was okay. It's one of the craziest shots you're ever going to see, because to throw that with any accuracy, to throw a spinner with accuracy, is incredibly difficult.
Yeah,
but I had seen the clip I saw was prefaced with "greatest shot of all time." And then I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be, and it was amazing. Is that the greatest shot of all time, given that it's the middle of the week and a round robin? I don't know. It's a circumstance playing to it. What just happened? Another summer show idea. Thank you, Twitter Spiel, for that. But Scott, I obviously didn't see it live because it was the middle of the night where I was, and I saw it on Twitter the next morning having breakfast. Did you see this live?
Yeah, so I was watching it on the TV in my office that's to the side of my desk, but I was in a meeting, so I didn't have the sound on, and I did look over and go like, oh, they don't have anything. And then I was like back on the meeting, paying attention, working hard. And when the meeting was over, I looked back and they were like replaying the shot, or they were still playing, and I was like, how did they go to an extra? What is going on? So yeah, it was pretty incredible, very innovative, and something that yeah, we'll definitely talk in the summer about greatest shots of all time. It definitely has a chance to be one of those most replayed shots of all time.
Yes.
You know, if
Yeah.
we think about Al Hackner and the shot,
Mm-hmm.
that's been replayed again and again and again and again. And, you know, when you think about it now, like, whatever, it's just a double takeout, like, big deal. But,
Yeah.
but circumstance, right? And
Yeah.
in this one, I think what would have elevated it would be if it had won the game for Sweden, because they didn't win the game. And I think, you know, you can think about, oh, wow, that's an incredible shot. But at the end of the day, like, they still lost. So if you'd missed the shot, whatever, it would have been the same outcome.
Yeah. And it's one of these things too, that I really wonder, if he's down 1 there, does he throw it and try to win? Right. That's sort of the big question for me.
Yes.
The fact that he's down 2 and has really no other option. That's the only way that the game can continue. You have to throw it. The other thing that I think is curious too, all these spinners that I've seen, and Oscar Eriksson tried one, and I think successfully had one earlier in the season, is it's on the intern. I think it's a little easier on the intern. And I wonder if, for a team like Niklas Edin, who obviously practices this, in that late game scenario with the hammer, where you might have a situation like this, they're setting up the end on the intern side just in case this is potentially going to be an option. Because on the outturn, I think it's a little harder to get that much rotation without cranking your wrist to the point where you're going to dump it a little bit or flip it inside. The outturn feels a little more natural to me. You have a little more wrist movement from the in to the outside. So I do kind of wonder about that, but really an incredible shot. And you're right, it's going to be replayed a ton. It was really fun to see, and especially because you love it. And this isn't just a Russ thing. Whenever a commentator just goes, nope, not there, that's not going to happen, and then it happens, that's always a lot of fun. It kind of reminded me of the Glenn Howard shot too, where they're like, oh, is this there? And Glenn even says, intern or outturn, doesn't matter. Just throw it. And then they make the shot. So it kind of goes in that Glenn Howard category for me. Incredible shot. Now, the Glenn Howard shot won the game that he was playing versus this taking it to an extra, but a shot during a round robin, super fun, replay it a whole ton. Greatest of all time, I don't know. I think circumstance matters, which is why the Jennifer Jones in off or the Sandra Schmirler in off, like those ones are super duper impressive, even though we see that type of shot a little more frequently. So I don't know. Again, fun summer idea and an incredible shot. And I did see on social media that Mike McEwen went to the local club and said he made 2 out of 10 when he set up the same thing, which is pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive, yeah. But even to go and try it, like, I think we're going to see a lot of club curlers, you know, trying this kind of thing.
Try the spinner, yeah.
I mean, it'll be fun to see. And then Niklas Edin did throw one in his last shot against Brad Gushue on Saturday. Yeah, Saturday in the semifinal. And the crowd went nuts for it. So, and ho-hum, by the way, he still made a double takeout with it, even though it didn't get him any points. It was just like, oh, I just threw this for fun and I got a double takeout. Even though the other team still stole 2, it was like pretty fun.
Jeff Stoughton had the spinner when he was out of it in a game, and now Niklas Edin does too, just a different version of it.
Exactly.
So that was a really fun thing to come out of this. Overall, seems like the event was pretty good. You're looking at a total attendance of just under 76,000 over the course of the week. Obvious bumps on the weekends, and when Canada was playing, pretty light early in the week, especially those morning draws. Most attended draw, not the final, but in fact that Friday night game where Sweden and Canada were playing each other. 6,500 packed house there at the arena at TD Place on Friday night. Good job, Ottawa. Don't say that too often around these parts, but good job, Ottawa, on hosting. Seemed like a good time, Scott. The patch is always a big issue here on the events in Ottawa, because at the 2017 Olympic trials, you had to get on buses to go over to the patch when it was at Canadian Tire Place, Center, whatever it's called, the garage, if you will.
Yeah.
This time, just a few steps away from the entrances at the Aberdeen Pavilion. Did you make your way into the patch at all?
Sean, I did make my way into the patch a couple times. I have some comments about the patch. I think that there were a lot of really great things about the patch. It was close to the venue, as you said. There was a lot of room in there. There was a big stage, real bathrooms, from what I'm told, not portalettes. Great. There was tons of stuff to do. There was cool shots curling. There was like a big inflatable thing where you could throw some curling rocks. There were places to pose with tractors, for pictures.
Nice.
Always like that. The up closes and personals were there. Really, really good. Where I'll say that the patch failed me was the beer selection was garbage.
Sure.
Now that they have sponsors that they have to adhere to, but it was really bad and it was very expensive. It was $11 for a bad can of beer.
Wow.
And it honestly dissuaded me from going more than I did because I was like, whatever.
Yeah. That's tough in that spot because if anyone's ever been to the new Lansdowne Park, this is not Lansdowne Park from 15 years ago where it was just a parking lot. There is some stuff to do there. And the place directly across from the Aberdeen Pavilion, I very much enjoy, and you can get a pint there for $6.50 of pretty good stuff. And if the weather was nice-ish, they had heaters outside. I'm sure they tried to open up their patio a little bit some point when the city was not covered in ice, which I'm very glad I missed, by the way. It's, if that's the case, I think you got to take into account a little bit the spot you're in because you're surrounded by bars in this case. Like at some point you got to acknowledge that.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like I say, I know they have sponsors that they have to make happy, but the selection was such that I would rather go somewhere else. So but other than that, it was great. There was lots to do. Lots of space to meet people. Ran into Dean on the scene there. Ran into a few other people from the Ottawa Curling Club. So a great space. It just didn't have enough to make me want to go more.
And that's too bad because it should be, you should want to go to the patch. But again, the circumstances with the circumstances. So, Scott, anything else from the 2023 Men's World Curling Championship?
I don't think so. Not from the event. Overall, I had a good time. Glad it was here in Ottawa. And next time, I think I would take off some time from work to be able to fully immerse myself.
As I said, though, or as I'm sure most people know, or at least people in the eastern part of the country know, there was an ice storm at some point. Did that affect anything? I did see someone tweeted that there were buckets on the concourse getting leakage, and there was an issue a few years ago at that facility with a leaky roof. Didn't seem like there was an issue with the ice surface at all, but in terms of getting around the city.
Yeah. Well, it dissuaded me actually from going one night, like the night that it happened. I was planning to go. It was the Wednesday night. I forget who they were playing Wednesday night, but I'd planned to go. Our teammate Jesse was going to be there, and so that was my plan. And because of the ice storm, I decided not to go, and I decided to stay home. And I went on Thursday night instead, where they played Scotland and lost to them. Canada played Scotland, that is, and it did impact my plans for the week. But it was melted pretty much by the next afternoon. It was just like really bad for a lot of people losing power. Some people I know in Gatineau had no power for 5 days and was just really bad. And cleaning up, even walking around the glebe, parking, by the way, was not good for this event, but walking around the glebe, there's even on Sunday, there's lots of trees still down, limbs scattered everywhere that, were just waiting to be cleaned up because there was so much.
Yeah, and that's the only evidence that I saw when I got back, is that there's some trees on the ground, but it seems like everybody's been reconnected on power. Yes, a bit of a scary situation to read about when you're gone, but I've often said that the time of year where I was out is a good time of year to be out of Ottawa, because you're going to miss that last storm. And looking at the forecast, seems like it did this year, and but glad that it didn't affect the event too much. You saw 2,900 people, or the attendance is listed as 2,900 for that Wednesday night, but I believe they go tickets sold as opposed to actual people who show up at the draws. So who knows how accurate that number is in terms of people in the seats, but good to know that we didn't have a leakage situation affect the play on the ice at the World Championship. So everyone now moving on to Toronto for the Players Championship. Allegedly, that event has started. There is not much video evidence of that being the case. I guess, to be fair to Sportsnet, baseball's fully in swing, and their pucks are about to hit the playoffs. And basketball playoffs are starting. I don't know who is the game tonight. Does the Raptors take on the Bulls in the play-in tournament? But a lot going on. So coverage of that will start on Thursday, as is typical for that. Some discussion. We'll talk about this at another point, but the idea of best on best being something that should end the season, and the players being the best on best event, is it? It's the best playing the four other teams in their pool, but we could certainly talk about that. And from all accounts, I've heard that the Champions Cup is going away next year. So lots of changes on the horizon, but that is all for the summer. So do subscribe, as we will talk about that in the forthcoming months. One of our favorite times of year to talk about the big issues in the sport. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, likes, rates, comments, all that good stuff. Really helps us out. You can head on over to GameOfThronesPod.com. All of our past episodes there, plus a link to the merch. Lots of good stuff on that merch tab. I'm using my mug a lot at work. So,
Nice.
Check out the options that we have available. And of course, you can follow with everything we got going on social media at Game of Stones Pod on Twitter and Instagram, Game of Stones Podcast on Facebook, and reach out. Let us know what you want to hear on the show. Game of Stones Podcast at gmail.com. Scott, the weather has turned. Spring is here. What's on your mind?
So one last thing before we go. We got an email from Jerry Hermans, our friend in over at Curling Zemst in
Belgium. Yeah.
In Belgium. Right. So he wanted me to reach out to everyone and say that they're putting on the 4th Golden Carolus Classic, May 19th to 21st at the club. You can get a link for it. We'll put it in the show notes, Sean.
We will.
And Golden Carolus is one of the brands at the brewery that helps sponsor the event. So 3 days of good curling before the end of the year.
We are...
I will not be able to go because I'm going to be in Europe, but for work. So it'll be too bad.
Yeah, and Jerry's played in the World Seniors, which I believe is kicking off soonish in a couple weeks. I don't know. I haven't looked at the rosters yet to know who's going and what'll be there. But that spiel, from all accounts, is a really good time. So yeah, check out the show notes below. I will put that down there. Thanks to Jerry for setting that up or letting us know about that. And of course, if you got spiels you want us to talk about, you want to promo, especially if they're sponsored by breweries, we are interested in them. So do feel free to reach out, and we will talk about them on future episodes, perhaps even next week when we join you again. So until then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.